Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that over there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, the final in our Zhang Yimou series with his latest film, The Great Wall. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com and subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel. And friend of the show, Ben Lott, has written in with a blot spot, a rebound on our last Zhang Yimou film, Hero.
He says, Hero is a stunningly beautiful film. I love the visual style and how Zhang Yimou utilizes unique colors to differentiate each act. This type of storytelling, where you keep going back and presenting events from a new point of view, is something I absolutely adore. I tend to have an aversion to foreign films, but Hero was a delightful treat that I'm anxious to watch again soon. Your rank 116, my rank 28.
Wow. I didn't see that coming.
It's a keeper.
What was it that happened? I've already forgotten. How did it end up at 116? What did it lose to that dropped it to 116?
Raise the Red Lantern.
Oh. Oh, yeah.
I think it had a little rock, paper, scissors loss there. Sorry about that.
Hey, friend of the show, Ocean, caught up with us about a review of Coming to America, and his criticism, apart from saying that we broke his soul a little bit with our review, was that he needed a clearer definition of holding up for these movies that we revisit after many years when we say the movie didn't hold up. And that was something that we said about Coming to America. And, his comparison was to The Godfather. He says, you show that movie to someone who's never seen it, and he contends it wouldn't hold up at all. And so part of his constituent sort of element of this definition was, had you gone through the period and then watch it again, maybe it holds up better for you or something. How do we define holding up, Andy? What do you think?
That's an interesting one. I guess it's a film that lives on past its time and doesn't feel kind of antiquated and stuck, like dated. The reason that The Godfather, I think, shot so high on our chart is because it is a film that stands the test of time. I wasn't born when that film came out, but it's a film that I can very easily connect to whenever I watch it. I would think that a person who watches The Godfather any time is going to find a connection to it. But, at the same time, I also do think, and we've talked about this with a number of films that we've watched and talked about on the show, a lot of it boils down to when you see it. A film like Joe versus the Volcano that we both love may be only because we happen to see it at a key point in our lives where it just really connected, for us. Whereas now, if somebody just picked that up and watched it, it might be something that they didn't think held up. So, there's that line, I think.
It's interesting. The more I've been thinking about it after this conversation, or after these conversations that you and I have had about, what does it mean to have a movie hold up, I think one of the elements is that the cultural stylings and sort of the cultural the elements of the film, you have to be able to take the story of the film and remove it from those cultural sort of elements and see if it's still a good story.
Yes.
And that for me is the Coming to America Godfather comparison. Like, you could take The Godfather and put it in a different time and space with the same story and the same characters, but put it in, 2126, and it's suddenly a future mob movie. And I contend it would still hold up. Like, it's a great story, first and foremost. It's a story about family. It's a story about... I think there is so much 80s culture in Coming to America that helps that movie to exist in that time and space, that if you take that out of that time and space, it doesn't hold up because it needs that culture to breathe. It's like unplugging it from the breathing machine, It can't leave that time and stand on its own as a great story. What do you think? A fair start?
I do think so. I think that definitely is something that can fit. It really boils down to just having a solid story. And I mean, one of the weakest things about Coming to America for me was the ending. It just really kind of fell apart at the end with the way that everything resolved. It was very frustrating.
That has nothing to do with that's just straight up storytelling, right? I mean, that's just straight up filmmaking. That has nothing to do with the 80s culture stuff.
It doesn't, but I think that's the element that when you step outside of that 80s culture and you're watching it today, now you're stuck with the story. And is that going to be able to hold up?
So, Ocean, thanks for the comment, man. It's given me a lot to think about over these last couple of days, so I appreciate it. And I'm going to keep testing this theory when we say hold up.
Yes, good idea.
I have a feeling we might be talking about it with this film that we're seeing tonight at some point. So there you go, Andy. I think it's time. Let's do trailers.
So my trailer, Pete, is for a film that played at Sundance this past January and is now going to have a home on Netflix. It's called The Discovery. Have you heard of this little film?
Yeah.
I love the concept. It's a really interesting kind of a sci-fi story. It's a story that is about, it's a kind of a romance sci-fi. It looks like there's a hint of kind of some thriller in there. It's a love story with some of this thriller element thrown in, set a year after a scientist proves that the afterlife exists. And it's this period of time where all of a sudden, people are just all like killing themselves because, hey, I can go to heaven because it's real. It's a real place. And the son of this inventor ends up falling in love with this girl who's got this dark past. You don't get a ton of that out of the trailer. I kind of read some more stuff about it, but the trailer, man, it's just got such a great creepy vibe with that warbly record sound of Roy Orbison singing "Only the Lonely." It's super creepy, and it lends this air of just kind of this horror mystery sort of thing going on here with this sci-fi future where all of a sudden, people, hey, we're going to all kill ourselves because we can go straight to heaven or possibly hell. Who knows? But I don't know. The concept is just so cool. I'm so excited to see this one. It's got Robert Redford as the scientist who discovers it, and his son, Jason Segel, and then Rooney Mara is who he falls in love with. There's also Riley Keough and Jesse Plemons. So it's a really interesting cast. I'm kind of really excited, and I'm glad it's going to be on Netflix because it'll be super easy to see. What do you think of this one?
I'm really rooting for this movie for a number of reasons, not the least of which is it's one of those movies like Primer that I think takes a rule that we all sort of take for granted and then as a thought experiment breaks that rule to see kind of what would happen. And the idea that confirming that the afterlife exists suddenly breaks humanity is fascinating to me. I think it is a really interesting story. I'm really rooting for Charlie McDowell. I love this guy, not the least of which because he directed two of my favorite episodes of Silicon Valley. Meinert Sagan's Haversack, I think, is one of the funniest episodes that they did on that show, and that was the first one he did. He also did the one I love, which was another kind of a strange film with Mark Duplass and Ted Danson and Elizabeth Moss, and so I'm really really interested in it. But the first thought I had, and I hadn't read up on this film before you sent me the trailer, was, wow, Netflix, you are totally cornering the market on weird filmmaking right now. Anyway, I think they are really cornering the market on some adventurous, dark stuff, and I'm really enthusiastic about it. So, no, I think it's great.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it too. And I haven't seen the what was it, The One I Love, that movie you were just talking about that he had directed. It's been on my list of films to watch, so I've got to check that one out. But yeah, this is going to be coming out soon, March 31st. It'll be playing on Netflix, so check it out, everybody. What's your trailer?
My trailer, Andy, is the house. I'm almost a little bit embarrassed that I picked this one, but I have to tell you, I really laughed at this trailer. I laughed for a number of reasons, mostly because, when you see a movie that you see a comedy and the premise of the comedy is rooted in a fear that you so deeply share in your own life. We are getting to that age as a family where my first child is less than 4 years from going away to college. And that is becoming a financial pre-stress. We're in the pre-stress stage, sort of alpha stress. As we think about kind of what happens next, these years are flying by. And so then I watched this trailer, which is all about Will Ferrell and Amy Poehler sharing their excitement with their daughter who gets into college, but of course then they discover they can't pay for it. And it's about what they do, the lengths to which they will go to figure out how to pay for college. I want this to be like old school. I want this to be so funny. And I deeply want it to be funnier than the trailer, which was already funny. I don't want the trailer to be the be-all, end-all of funny in this movie, mostly because Jason Mantzoukas is in it, and he is one of my very favorite comedians right now. The guy is just bizarre, and I really want to see him succeed in this film. So there you go. Written by Andrew J. Cohen and Brendan O'Brien, directed by Cohen himself. As I said, Will Ferrell, Amy Poehler, Jason Mantzoukas, Ryan Simpkins plays the daughter, Allison Tolman, Andrea Savage, and others. What'd you think?
Yeah. It's one of those ones.
I knew you were going to be all like that.
Here's the thing. I mean, it's one of those trailers that I was watching. I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I expected it to be. Everything about it is so like exactly what you'd expect. I mean, a gambling den in their basement. It is old school, but for parents trying to raise a little extra money. So I was like, okay, yeah, it's pretty expected. But I got to say, the last bit of the trailer had me practically rolling on the floor. When he's like trying not to gag as he's threatening the guy after they accidentally chop his finger off. Now you go downstairs and tell your friends what we're going to do.
See?
That
could be the end of the funny, but I hope not.
That made the whole trailer watching experience worth it. So for that, thank you.
Aw. I'm so glad to hear it. Starts rolling out in Brazil, June 29th. Only have a couple of release dates, June 29th for Singapore, UK, June 30th, US, June 30th, Germany, July, Philippines, August 23rd. That's it so far, but I imagine it'll get out there.
Yeah.
I fought for greed and gods. This is the first war I've seen worth fighting for.
We have traveled thousands of miles in search of a weapon more powerful than we have ever known.
Why are you here?
We came to trade.
You lie. You are thieves.
What was that?
There are many things you have not seen.
The Great Wall is the only barrier keeping the world safe.
The Great Wall, Andy. Zhang Yimou, written by Carlo Bernard, Doug Miro, and other people. Stars Matt Damon, Jing Tian, Pedro Pascal, Willem Dafoe, Andy Lau, what a guy, Zhang Hanyu, and others in this story. It is historical fiction. It tells a story of a great wall in a universe far, far away that was built for one reason, to keep out the lizard dragons, the hordes that come from the Emerald Mountain to take over China. What did you think of this film, Andy?
It's like the strangest film to throw into Zhang Yimou's catalog of films. It's just like so not anything I expected to see. Kind of, I mean, he's done some of the wuxia films. We've talked about Hero, and he's done what's the other one? House of the Flying Daggers. And he makes gorgeous films. I watched another film that he did recently. It was another film that was kind of a half Chinese, half English film that he did with Christian Bale a few years ago called The Flowers of War, which it's very much just kind of a historical drama film. And it's interesting that this film, The Great Wall, is being billed as his first English language film, because this has as much of a balance between English and Chinese as The Flowers of War did. I think this is just kind of a bigger film, so they're pushing it that way. But it's a totally different type of film. And this one, I guess I went into this really not expecting much, because the trailers looked pretty ludicrous with, these monsters on the other side of the wall. It just kind of looked like silly nonsense. But I have to say, I actually kind of had some fun watching the movie. I have some real issues with it, but at the same time, I did find myself enjoying it. So there you go. What do you think?
It's funny that you sort of introduce your opinion with this being a film that falls for you outside of what you expected from Zhang Yimou right now, because I walked out saying, wow, that's a Zhang Yimou film, right? If you look at what he has done with the films that we've talked about, right? His use of color, his use of camera, his use of movement, his incredible sort of affinity with shooting large structures and scale. This film is like the pinnacle of everything we've talked about leading up to this. His use of giant casts, if anything, I mean, like hundreds and thousands of extras that were non-CG, right? Let alone all of the masses of CG players. This really, I think, represents sort of the next stop for him making a giant budget film. He is, watching the interview material around this thing coming from China is, you see Zhang Yimou as a wildly celebrated cultural hero in that country right now. So this is a giant step for him making a movie of this size and this budget. And I think he landed all of his jumps on, the things that I love the most about his filmmaking style, the visual style. I love the colors. I love the flowing. I love the wackiness of some of the stuff that he makes this fantasy army do. It was just bananas. I'm with you. I have a few problems with it, but I had a surprisingly good time at this movie.
And yeah, I guess what I was saying was, I wasn't expecting this to be a Zhang Yimou film. Like, I watched the trailers, it just seemed so not what he would be doing. But after watching the film, I'm like, that is exactly what I would expect Zhang Yimou to do with this. It really did fit with the color and the design and the scope and just the way everything falls into place. So I really did enjoy it. But there definitely are a few little issues. My biggest issue, the film sets up this whole idea how there are real stories about why this 1,700-mile wall was built in China, and there are legends about why this wall was built. This is one of the legends. I loved that setup. It's like, we're going to have fun with this. Don't expect anything real here. This is just a fantasy about a story that people have made up about why the Great Wall is here.
It's like they buy filmmaking credibility with the audience by doing that.
I loved that.
Because the trailers, to your point, were bad.
They were terrible trailers. That sets it up nicely. But even with that, I still had a hard time buying the legend about, okay, this meteor crashed into the this mountain and it made the mountain green for some reason. But then they build this 1,700-mile wall to protect them from these dragons that come out from only this one mountain that they can see right up a valley, so they can see everything coming out of it and coming toward them. It's like, why did they have to build this huge wall if this is the only spot that these creatures seem to attack the wall? That was like the one thing that I was just like, well, I don't really.
That was your problem?
That was just one of my problems, but it's just like it doesn't give me a reason to believe that they had to build this wall across half the country just to defend from this one mountain. Why didn't they build a wall around the mountain?
Okay, we just got finished saying that the setup in the beginning buys credibility, and the central point, the central anchor about which you need to extend this credibility, you have problems with.
I know.
It's a fantasy.
I get it. I wish that the dragons were attacking
I'm not
other
sure
spots
you
of the
do.
wall too. They only attack this one spot. It's like, okay, at the beginning we set this up where it's like Lord of the Rings or Return of the King. They've got the smokestacks on the mountains, telling people that they're coming. Here we've got, the smoke's coming down the chain of all the different towers along the Great Wall. But I didn't understand why, because it's like, but the mountain's right there up the valley. Why are they coming? Some of that was nonsensical, but it is a big dragon.
I would submit that we don't know. I mean, there is a chance that there were other giant sort of onyx tunnels of rage coming down from the mountain that we couldn't see.
That's possible. And they tell us that these dragons are getting smarter. They could be spreading out and attacking at different points. It's just never
because the dragons by the climax of the movie, by the end of the movie, there are more dragons than we had seen prior.
Yes, and they are clearly smart because they did find a way to tunnel under the wall to get to the capital.
Very smart. Although, to your point, that tunnel was not very big. To my point, there must be other tunnels.
I love this. This is just like just a bananas conversation about a bananas film.
It is a bananas. But I got to step back. So I've been thinking about, because I saw it on Friday, and so as we're recording this, it's now Monday, and so I've had a couple of days to think about it. You just saw it yesterday, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and so I don't know. Maybe I've been stewing on it for too long, longer than the film deserves. But these interviews that I've been watching with particularly the Chinese actors, Andy Lau, says said that, Tao Te, which is what they call these monsters, it is a symbol of greed, right? And so when you see these waves of Tao Te, these monsters hammering against the Great Wall, it is fighting back the greed with the will and the wall of humanity, right? And so it becomes much more of a story of kind of cultural imposition, and I think that makes the movie even better when you look at it through the lens of metaphor.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you buy it?
I think it's an interesting way to look at it. I struggle with thinking that there was a lot of metaphor here. But again, it's like Zhang Yimou. I really did feel like the whole concept really comes from Commander Lin and this idea of, the Chinese people are a people who work together. It's all about that, that one land, that idea that we talked about with Hero. It's like this is people who group together to fight together, to be together as one. And to that end, maybe you're right.
Well, and greed becomes its own form of cultural imperialism, right? Infecting and imposing itself on the will of the sort of honest working class, right? The people who work together, share the load, the communal aspects and politics. And I think it tells an interesting story. So I find it actually more interesting thinking about that, and coupled with Yimou's incredible visuals. I struggled a little bit because at some point I wanted to compare this to The Fifth Element on the Great Wall. At what point would the visuals have been overboard for you? Because I know you weren't as crazy about that as I was.
The visuals?
Did anything in the Cirque du Soleil-ness of the army, the flamboyance of the army, get under your skin?
No, I loved all of that. I thought it was beautiful. I mean, that really showed a lot of what Zhang Yimou brought to this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it really was about just these different groups within the army that all were kind of trained with a very specific purpose. And it's like color coding. So it was easy to get. Okay. So the soldiers in the black are the foot soldiers. The soldiers in blue are the, I don't remember what they call them. The crane troop or whatever, the skydiver.
Yeah,
the
crane
bungee,
troopers, right?
Bungee girls.
Yeah.
And the yellow ones were the archers, and they all had their own little color coding. And I loved that.
It was like my first military. Like, you cannot get lost.
Exactly. This is
you're purple. You know exactly where you're going.
Right. Exactly. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
To that end, I was disappointed that the guy who kept getting picked on didn't get his colors taken away when he had to go work in the kitchen. It's like, no, you're the kitchen color. You're dirty brown now.
I know, but what's so great is that he had to actually wear his colors in the kitchen and his helmet. Like,
right, I
he
know.
had to completely do all the kitchen stuff for the entire army, as far as I could tell. Like, there was nobody else in the kitchen with him.
Right, it was just him.
So on the script, and back to this point about the trailer, because we both kind of poo-pooed the trailer a little bit. And I think the risk of the trailer was the way they handled Matt Damon. And maybe that was because, we were watching a U.S. domestic release. I don't know. I haven't watched all of the international trailers yet, but part of it was, what kind of movie is this going to be? I think the script, the screenplay by Carla Bernard, Doug Miro, and Tony Gilroy, story by Max Brooks, Edward Zwick, and Marshall Hershkovitz. I actually think the story makes much more sense than the trailer deserved.
I think that the story makes total sense. I mean, it was a very easy to understand story. I don't know. I wonder if they tried to find a way to sell the trailer, or just to sell the concept to dumb Americans, so that people could understand it in a lowest common denominator sort of thing. But I don't know. It just ended up feeling like it didn't sell the story as well as it should have. It made it much more focused on kind of the mystery of what's out there and all that. And it really did try to emphasize some of that kind of the buddy adventure sort of story between Matt Damon's character and his buddy Tovar, played by was it Pedro Pascal? That got played up in the trailer quite a bit, and to a certain extent, I think that was kind of one of the weaker elements of the film. But I mean, I still enjoyed their chemistry, I guess. But I felt like I wanted a little more of the story in the trailers. But
Yeah, and the story was actually more interesting. I mean, the whole conceit that this army, that is fighting off the Tao Te, is the sole possessor of gunpowder, and that's what gets our intrepid duo to the Great Wall in the first place. They're running from the Mongol hordes, and they end up trapped at the base of this of one of the bastions of the Great Wall. I think that was a fine intro for me. Like it took me into the story well, and that was the thing I was most concerned about. Was they're not going to be able to introduce this story. They're not going to be able to shoehorn Matt Damon into this story in a way that makes sense at all. And I think they actually did that.
They shoehorned him in well. Is that what you're saying?
I am. I'm going to stick with that.
I think they. Well, here's the thing. I mean, because there has been controversy from just the trailer, which we all know how ridiculous it is to start judging something based on a trailer, let alone even a teaser. And actually, the criticism really kicked off with the teaser when it first came out about, they're whitewashing history again. And Matt Damon kind of took him to task because these people were like, I think it was at a press conference back at the New York Comic Con, right after the first teaser came out, about how the film was being labeled as offensive for the white savior stereotyping. And he's just like, it wasn't, wait until you see the movie. You guys are judging this based on this teaser, and you don't have a sense of what the story is. And Pedro Pascal kind of joked. He's like, we're all guilty of whitewashing. We all know only the Chinese were the ones who defended the wall against the monsters. So it's like, it's this kind of this silliness of the whole idea of the whitewashing, at least judging something as being whitewashing when you haven't even seen it. And I think when you watch the film, it's like, here is this guy. I mean, okay, sure. He's the one who really kind of has the character arc over the course of the story, right? He starts as this kind of, he and his buddy, they're thieves. They bill themselves as traders, but really they're trying to find this black powder so they can kind of steal it and take it back and sell it for a fortune. Yeah, they're totally mercenaries. Yeah. And he's, like he says, he's fought for many flags, right? He goes through the list. He doesn't care who he's fighting for as long as he's getting money out of it. I mean, that's really what he's all about. But something changes within him here as he starts working with Commander Lin, and she kind of teaches him this whole concept of trust. And he says, I don't trust anybody except myself. But we see that change over the course of the film, and they start working with each other. So he gets that character arc, and to a certain extent, that kind of makes him our protagonist. But what I think is important is that it's not just his film. It really is a film of teamwork, and you have all of this group working together, and he and Commander Lin work together at the end to help bring the queen down. He's got a couple tries, it doesn't work, and then the two of them together, they devise a plan where they will come up with something to help destroy her. And I thought that was great. I thought that was nice seeing that, here he is, Matt Damon, this big American actor in this multicultural Zhang Yimou film, potentially taking it over as the white hero. But we are, getting to see him working with the people in the story, and this commander who, is also a woman, as they work together to actually defeat these dragons. And I thought that was great. And so I think it is something that is unfair to judge it being just a whitewashing of this story. I think it's, if anything, to me, it ended up speaking to the kind of the multicultural nature of how films are really going to start being, or maybe should start being, as the distributors really start trying to tap into these big markets like the Chinese market, which is just a huge market right now. And there's a lot of funding coming out of there. We've already heard all the stories about how there are scenes shot for all these Marvel films that are only ever seen in the Chinese markets that we'll never get to see unless we go over there to watch it. I think it's a hugely critical element of this new storytelling as all of this global money starts coming together and gluing these films together. And if you watch the credits of this film, I mean, it's not just Chinese people and filmmakers and storytellers and Americans. I mean, there were people in effects shops in India and France and in Asia, like all over the world. It really was a multicultural film. And so to that end, I thought they did a great job of bringing it all together.
I think we may be giving it a hard time because of the size of Matt Damon's face on the poster. It's really big. It's a really big face.
Yes, it is.
But how many times have you said, I know I have, where I watch a great film, a great foreign film, a great Chinese film, and I think, man, what would this person do if they had a Hollywood budget? Well, now we're going to start seeing that, right? We're seeing that more and more and more. We're seeing that certainly on display in this film. This is about as, much a testament to the future of production of these big budget films as I think we've yet seen, and actually maintains, I think, Yimou's artistry. That's the thing I think that I'm most impressed by with this film, that I walked away really seeing Zhang Yimou in this film, and I'm not sure I can say that about the maybe with not Civil War, but Winter Soldier. The Russo films had kind of a stamp on them, but the Marvel movies that are big kind of multicultural productions end up being Marvel movies, right? They go to great pains to sort of disguise the artistry beyond the mechanics. And this film, I felt like I was in a Zhang Yimou film. I felt like I was seeing what this guy wanted to put on screen, and every bit as much as we saw it in Hero and as we saw it in Raise the Red Lantern and Judo.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It really does have his stamp. And I mean, he is a filmmaker with an incredibly strong stamp. I mean, we've talked about the costumes and how gorgeous they were, but man, that tower, when they go into the tower that's all the stained glass windows all the way up, and you just have like that rainbow of light cutting across the screen. I mean, that was one of the most stunning things to look at. And I mean, I went and saw IMAX 3D because why not? It was Zhang Yimou. I wanted to see him on as big a screen as possible. And that was just, I mean, it was mind-bogglingly beautiful. And that really struck me as this is definitely a Zhang Yimou moment here when we get this tower just laced with the most beautiful light coming in from its stained glass. It was just stunning. So...
Well, there you go. And the pair with that, I mean, the trip they take to that tower, the rainbow tunnel where the Taote start reaching through the light in the ceiling and pulling people up, and then they go, I mean, talk about what a perfect example of his ability to handle length and height, right? I mean, it's something we've seen him do so well in all of the recent films that we have watched, and this movie, it added such a richness and resonance on this giant screen. I was really impressed.
Actually, one last note that I wanted to say about that I think is definitely worth talking about in context of this kind of shift that potentially that we'll be making. I really did like that it wasn't just everybody speaking in English. The fact that there was logic behind the language all through the film just totally sold me on it. I mean, there was a lot of Chinese being spoken with subtitles. There was a lot of English. Some of the Chinese characters spoke English, and there was a reason for it. I really respected that they found a way to kind of tie all that together. And that, sometimes you see these films that take place. I mean, this very easily could have been done with everybody speaking English just with accents. And they didn't do that, and I give them a lot of kudos for that.
I actually thought about that. There's a place when there's a part in the film where they're eating dinner and they bring Matt Damon and Pedro out, and there's a part where they're all speaking Chinese and Damon says, "What'd he say?" And I thought, man, now I feel like I'm there.
Yeah,
like that's what it would be like. Like I would be saying that all the time, and I totally agree with you. I think it's perfect. Let's move into first shot, last shot.
Okay, the first shot of the film from the opening logos of the distribution companies, we have the logo for Legendary Pictures over a globe, and then we drop down from that globe onto China, and we see the Great Wall, and we get a few other shots following of the wall, paired with some on-screen text about the true stories, why the wall was created, as well as the legends.
And the last shot, now we are moving away from the wall. William and Tovar ride away with their escort. General Lin is standing alone on the wildly curving wall watching them ride into the distance.
Yeah, they sure
How do
didn't.
they pair up?
They sure didn't make this a straight wall. It was really. It's
No.
like, man, which way is this wall going?
Yeah, I think the story for me is really this is the intro and outro to a fable, and I think it works well on that front. We kind of move in. You almost feel the pages opening to a book, and as they ride away at the end of the film, you feel the story sort of come to an end.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, it's called The Great Wall. This is a story about what is behind the wall that we have to defend ourselves from and the people defending it. And so we get that. And I should have said at the very first shot, we get these various shots of the wall, and the very last shot we get before the title, it's a close-up of the wall as something from the other side like hits the wall, and the wall kind of cracks and kind of starts to crumble as then the camera flies in through the crack and we get the title. So kind of just a sense of, where our story is and the legends about it. So.
Well, and that's a really good point. One of the things I wanted to say early on, I totally spaced, was that they get us into a major battle really fast in this film, right? I mean, they get Matt Damon and Pedro to the wall fairly quickly, and then we see the hordes. Like there is no suspense about what these things look like or what they're going to do or how they communicate. They educate us onto the sort of world of the Taute very, very quickly and efficiently for a film like this. Let's go into the cast. Casting by John Papsidera and Victoria Thomas. And they landed Mr. Matt Damon as William Guerin. What'd you think of Matt, the Wandering Scot-ish?
The Wandering something. I enjoyed him in the film. I thought he carried the character well. I think, if anything, I was a little frustrated initially with his dialect. I could never quite pinpoint what it was, and I couldn't. It also had kind of a stilted read to it, and I wasn't sure if that's because of the way that the script was written and translated, or whatever it was, or if that's just kind of his choice as an actor to kind of play it that way. But I got used to it, and as the film wore on, I was like, okay, I'm kind of used to this way that he's speaking all the time. It was very strange, but in the end, it didn't bother me. But it did take some getting used to.
But this is the part I had sort of the most trouble with, I think, in the film, and I am a huge fan of Matt Damon. The challenge that I have with his accent is it never really landed.
Yeah,
it never really stuck. From sequence to sequence, it was heaviest in the very beginning of the film, and it was always subtle. But in the beginning of the film, I actually liked it. I found myself sort of thinking about it. I mean, it comes off as sort of a thick-necked kind of like it's coming from deep in his chest. He's really put it low in his throat, and I think it sounded great, and it never really stuck throughout the course of the film. It would weave in and out of his sequences, and that was frustrating, and I found it distracting. Otherwise, I think the performance was fine. I bought him as the Archer. I thought he was I've always thought Matt Damon is a fantastic physical actor, and he is, as we've talked about before, he's enormously charismatic on screen, and it was better than the Last Bourne movie. So I call it a win.
Yes, I would say so. That's a good point. That was a pretty bad film. It's an interesting accent. I'm curious to see how it holds up over time.
Yeah, talk about holding up. If you don't have the wall, Andy, if you take Matt Damon out of the wall, will the accent hold up? Jing Tian is Commander Lin Mei of the Crane Troop. Talk a little bit about what her job was in the film. Can you describe it?
Well, her job, she's the commander of the, what are they called again? The Crane Troop?
The Crane Troop.
Crane soldiers. They dress in blue. And
very, very bright.
And they strap themselves into basically like rope bungee cords. And I
want you to imagine going fly fishing.
Right. They hurl themselves off the wall and slash at the dragons only to get yanked back up again. Hopefully not eaten while they're down at the bottom. Crazy. But
so stupid. It was so stupid and so beautiful. Like,
absolutely.
I am in such favor of this element of the film, even though I heartily acknowledge It is ridiculous.
Oh,
it is
is
ridiculous.
Well, and it's funny because I mean these guys have so many variations on ways to attack these dragons. They have to be really careful which ones they use at the same time because I mean thank goodness they didn't, use the little knife, the giant knives that they have, the scissors on the sides of the walls that like cut the dragons in half when the women were out there on their ropes, because that would have just been a disaster. So obviously they've got some very specific rules about what's going on at the same time.
Always make sure the red shirts are talking to the blue shirts, Andy.
Exactly.
That's the point. I thought she was terrific. She is. I thought the whole cadre of women in this role, and they're all women, incredibly acrobatic women, and apparently they were recruited from the Shaolin Temple, according to Damon in one of his interviews. A lot of these incredibly physical sort of performances came straight out of the temple, and they were gorgeous to watch on screen. It was crazy. I thought she was great. I thought her English was great. I thought she was she served well as sort of a strong commander. I bought it, and she is very petite. I think this would have been a really easy role to not be able to kind of sink your teeth into as an audience member. And I thought she did a fantastic job.
Yeah, I loved her. I thought she was a great leader too. I liked that aspect that she really kind of takes over and, from commander, and after the general gets killed, kind of steps up and starts leading. She was a perfect choice. I thought she had the sensibilities, and the conversations that she had with William over the course of the film about trust and about working together and all of that, I thought that was a nice pairing, and how they were the same type. No, they weren't the same type, all of that sort of stuff. Really interesting. And I liked that character balance between these two. I thought she was a great choice for this. And I'm excited to see her in Kong Skull Island coming out soon.
Pedro Pascal plays the Pero Tovar. He's the buddy.
I haven't seen him in. I don't think I've seen anything that he's been in. He's been doing a lot of TV. He's been kind of all over the place, and he was with Matt Damon back in the Adjustment Bureau. But man, he's one of those guys who's kind of just escaped my my field of view. Narcos. I mean, that's definitely a big one for him. So I enjoyed him in this. As somebody who I'm kind of familiar with him as an actor, but I just hadn't seen him in anything. I enjoyed him as a character in this. I wish that I liked the relationship between him and William a little better, but I still enjoyed him.
I'm a big fan of Oberyn Martell on Game of Thrones, and I think he's fantastic. Ooh, tough.
I need to
Tough
watch.
role.
I haven't quite caught up to that bit, so I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be the next round of Game of Thrones for me, so I'm looking forward to it.
You got some catching up to do. It's worth it. He's worth catching, and he's very. I mean, in this film, he actually looks really like a physical presence, and it's. In Game of Thrones, it's the opposite. Like, he is wiry and lithe and strong, but not big. And it's important that he's not big, because his 7 episodes on the show lead up to something where he needs to look like a shadow against a mountain, so to speak. Oh, Andy, I can't believe we can't talk about this. Anyway,
I've read the book. I've read the book. I know it.
Oh,
I
right.
know who he
Okay.
is.
I guess. All right. Anyway, he's great. I am right with you. And that is one of the central kind of problems I have with the film, beyond William's accent never really sticking, is that their friendship, and I know it's not really a friendship, it's a partnership. It's a thing that kind of weaves in and out of relevance to the film, and to their journey together. And it is the other thing in the film that never really locks for me. I either go from wondering what the next plot point is that relates to them as a duo to not caring at all and forgetting that he was in the film. Like, there's a period where he's just gone for a while, and I didn't notice.
That's the biggest problem. And I think they set it up in an interesting way where this is a guy who they're kind of friends, but at the same time, he's also willing to just ditch his friend to make off with the black powder. along with
Well,
Willem
and
Dafoe.
they're friends by necessity, right?
Yeah, right,
because they're the two that lived in the group. Like,
Yeah,
there's
right.
no other reason for them to be hanging out.
Exactly. But then we get to the end, and I think this is one of my biggest frustrations with the film is like they go riding off together. It's like I never bought that friendship enough for Matt Damon to make the choice to go riding off with Tovar. It seemed to me that if any choice was going to be made, he would make the choice to stay and fight. And, maybe Tovar would leave, maybe Tovar would stay. But for me, is like William was in a place where he's like, I'm going to stay and I'm going to fight and I'm going to be a part of this community now. That to me would have made a more logical ending. And it just like, it seemed like they were trying to satisfy some like buddy comedy sort of ending by having the two of them ride off together. So that was for me one of the biggest moments of frustration for me.
I agree with you, and I to your point, I think they could have gone with the Seven Samurai ending, and it would have been great. Separate the duo, makes their relationship in hindsight that much stronger. Anyhow, Willem Dafoe. I was actually surprised to see Willem Dafoe in this film. I don't think I caught that he was even in it in the trailer.
Well, he's pretty clearly in the trailer, but you probably just were so taken by the dragons and everything else that you forgot. But,
and Matt Damon's giant head.
But, he's very Willem Dafoe.
Yep.
I think he was fine. I think I had more of a sense that he was more of a positive character from the trailer. And it was actually, it was kind of a relief to see that he really wasn't. He was just a scoundrel.
More interesting to me was Andy Lau as Wang, strategist and war counselor for the Nameless Order. I actually I've always loved Andy Lau, but it's really cool to see him in such a role of a stoic.
Yeah, I mean, he was, I'm trying to remember, in Infernal Affairs, which cop was he again? Was he the bad guy posing as the cop, or was he the cop posing as the bad guy?
I see when you put it that way. Who's to know? I think he was the cop posing as the bad guy.
I think he was.
He was the hero character.
Yes, he's the one who gets killed by the bad guy posing as a cop.
Right.
I really enjoyed him in that film. I enjoy him. I mean, it's just such a great presence to watch, and I think he's great here. I mean, he'd worked with Yimou on a couple other films, House of Flying Daggers. It might have just been that film. And then we talked about, when we were talking about Gong Li, how she was in the Chinese adaptation of What Women Want. He was the guy in that film with her. So there you go. Andy Lau and Gong Li. It seems like a great pairing.
So there are, this cast, those are the sort of the big five. This cast is full of really strong performances from a bunch of people that we haven't seen enough movies of, but I imagine we're going to see some of them again. So in that regard, in terms of the mechanics of this military, this was a well-cast film. Let's talk a little bit about getting it made briefly.
Yeah, I mean, this was a film that came out of Legendary Pictures. The producing team kind of put it together. It's an interesting, we mentioned the writers, but we didn't really talk much about it, as far as the fact that Max Brooks, Edward Zwick, Marshall Herskovitz were the people who came up with the story, and then Carlo Bernard, Doug Miro, and Tony Gilroy wrote the screenplay. None of them Chinese. I thought that was very interesting that was kind of the direction of this, which to a certain extent made it feel very much like Zhang Yimou was kind of a director for hire. And reading about it and really kind of looking at what they were really pushing for here. I mean, Legendary Pictures has a Chinese joint venture, Legendary East. And what that division is really trying to do is focus on some big budget Sino-U.S. co-productions with subjects that are based on the Chinese history, mythology, culture, all that sort of stuff. And so this is kind of a lead into that. And they are really kind of banking on this being successful. And it's kind of a big gamble. And I think it's going to succeed. So far, it looks like it's succeeding over there. I don't know if it's going to succeed as well over here. Zhang Yimou, here he is, this incredible filmmaker. He's done a lot of really great stuff. But he hasn't had a hit. We didn't really talk about this, but Hero is a huge hit for him. House of Flying Daggers came out right after that. That was another huge hit. everything else between has just not done as well. I mean, he's had some films that have been really successful as far as critics are concerned, but none of them have made quite as much money as some of those other big films. And so this is really something that he's like, he could use this big hit right now. And I think what happened is these guys were really trying to find a way to get all of these pieces to line up in such a way as to create this big action spectacle bridging the Chinese community and the American community, and cross their fingers and hope it works. We'll see. This is going to be a time will tell sort of thing because it's so fresh in theaters right now.
The cinematography was performed by Stuart Dryburgh and Zhao Xiaoding. Zhao Xiaoding is behind, actually, House of Flying Daggers, and maybe that shows just sort of how adept he is at working with Yao Ming. Stuart Dryburgh is behind Secret Life of Walter Mitty. I absolutely adore the camera in that movie. How do they split the work on a film like this?
I don't know. I need to. I didn't look at the American Cinematographer magazine. Often has some really great articles with cinematographers, interviews and stuff like that. I didn't have a chance to look at their magazine to see if they had anything about this particular film, talking about how stuff was split up. But I was curious about that too because I saw that it had two cinematographers credited, and they each had their own screen. So I wasn't sure if they weren't working together, but they both had very specific elements. I wasn't quite sure. So it's one of those weird things that I'd love to know a little bit more about the how that's structured.
Yeah, it's interesting too when you look at some of the work that each of these folks have done. I mean, they actually, when I compare them to the work of Zhang Yimou, they have a style that very much fits within his vision, right? I mean, they are very strong. They have a very strong sort of visual style, and even movies that we ultimately did not like at all had a very visual style. Stuart Dryburgh's behind Black Hat, for example, and so I think that's at least worth considering. I mean, maybe this was. I would love to hear more about the partnership between these three people.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, maybe one dealt more with the action side of things, one more dealt with more of the smaller moments, something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but it does pique my curiosity. Yeah. Speaking of the cinematography, I did just want to say I really enjoyed the bit in the fog. I thought that was really beautiful. Speaking of the color that Zhang Yimou always has, when we're shooting in fog, you don't get that. It's just kind of this blanket of white over everything, and it really kind of obscures so much. But I loved the way they dealt with it, and I love the way they dealt with the whistles to create the sounds and everything. But just the look of it, and when William slides down on the chain and he's down there trying to get that dragon dragged in. And it's just such an obscured world. And I thought the cinematography in that particular scene, that really struck out for me.
Yeah, it was really haunting. The other one for me was the release of the lanterns, which I thought worked on a number of levels. First, it was a beautiful ceremonial thing. I mean, it was the death of their leader, and that every soldier on the wall released one of these floating candles into the sky, the thousands of them kind of perforating that night sky in the path of the wall, I thought was just gorgeous. But also, speaking of the narrative, that the ultimate sort of climax takes place from one of these balloons. I didn't see that coming in terms of, we're literally hanging a lantern on this. That the final element is a giant, floating balloon, I thought was a nice touch.
Absolutely.
John Mayer is behind the production design, which was fantastic.
Well, and just speaking to the balloons that you were just talking about, I mean, they were pretty stellar to see these giant floating balloons. And what was so great about it is that they weren't completely effective and they weren't tested, and you had a lot of deaths from them, but they did it anyway. But that was all a part of the brilliant production design. They didn't have baskets or anything. It was just these platforms laced with extra black powder so they could have weapons and keep the balloons afloat. So I loved the design element of it that also went into it, and why so many of them ended up burning and exploding. It's just
It's terrible.
it's absolutely horrible. But I think production design just beautiful on a film like this, and for a film that's called The Great Wall, it could very easily just have become we're surrounded by gray bricks all the time. But in Zhang Yimou's world, when he's working with his production designer, they do a lot of great things. And then looking at the costumes that Maya C. Rubio does. I mean, this has to get nominated for best costume come next year, and I certainly would at this point say that it's going to win because these costumes are just amazing. Just the ornateness of them. I mean, just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, really stunning. The thing I've been thinking about since I saw the movie that I really wanted to close the loop on this with you was the CG arrows. And now we have CG arrows, we have CG cannonballs, fireballs, spiked fireballs, flaming fire cannonballs. We have CG narcotic-laced anchors flying through the air. How did the CG projectiles hold up for you, particularly in the IMAX 3D viewing experience?
I thought about that when I was seeing them, and they're all slow-mo and everything. I was like, I really... It's like Zhang Yimou was doing it just for me. Check it out.
Yeah.
Look the progress I've made.
Yeah, look at my ears. I'm going to put you in the arrows, then I'm going to put you in the flame trail of the cannonballs, and I'm going to put you in on the chain with the narcotic anchor, and you're going to love every minute of it, Andy Nelson.
In slow-mo, absolutely. He did it just for me, and I actually really enjoyed it. And I even really enjoyed the dragons. I saw some test footage of the dragons beforehand. I was like, oh, these are going to be pretty ridiculous. It's going to look terrible. But they actually had a really unique look. And, I mean, they were weird enough. Like, they have their eyes and their shoulders. It just was kind of nonsensical.
That was crazy.
But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? But it makes it different enough for me. So when I'm watching, it kind of throws me off a little bit. And I appreciated that because it actually, they had something different about them. And so in context of all of that, I thought they did a really unique thing with these creatures, and not to mention the really cool communication method that they have, kind of that, I know it's not quite telecommunication, but whatever that little radio communication that they're doing. I thought it was really cool.
Christian Scheuer is behind it was the conceptual creature designer of the film, and I thought it was really great. When you look at the creatures when they're not moving, you see that they have built into them the many of the beautiful sort of Chinese sort of art treatments, right? The symbolic treatments. You have the kind of maze on the heads of the kind of troops, and the designs that are actually built in to the skulls and the shapes of the heads, which I thought was a great throwback to Chinese art of the period. I mean, I think it when you go to these temples and you see these sort of gargoyle creatures, they all look like that. They've been recreated as sort of maquettes or homage to what an artist's rendering of these animals, and this is a rendering of an animal based on the art, which I thought was delightfully recursive.
I loved that too. Yeah, it was such a unique design for the creatures. And Weta, I think, did a lot of the actual design work on the creatures. Andrew Baker and the whole Weta team. I really kind of just love them. I liked the little hierarchy that they had, the masses of the soldier dragons, and then you had the kind of the giant muscly ones with the frill, like the frill neck, lizard almost sorts of things that would protect the queen, and then the queen in the middle of all that. It was such an interesting design. And again, we always go back to world building. This was a really interesting, a lot of details put into this, and certainly something that Zhang Yimou has done very consistently in all of his films.
Editing, Mary Jo Markey and Craig Wood. I thought it was well cut and well paced.
I didn't really have any problems with it. Yeah, it moved
not
moved
bad.
nicely. It wasn't too long. It wasn't too short. It just moved nicely. I mean, they've been doing quite a bit of big projects like, Star Trek Into Darkness, Star Wars The Force Awakens. So I think that they have a good sense of cutting films in a way that's going to move them along. Looking at that was Mary Jo Markey. But then looking at Craig Wood, it's things like Guardians of the Galaxy and Pirates of the Caribbean. They definitely are a pair that know how to cut action films together.
And finally, your favorite, Ramin Djawadi, did the music.
Yeah, he's a composer that I find so interesting. And sometimes I don't think much of his music, but every now and then he does some really interesting stuff. I love his work on Game of Thrones. And I just think he does some really nice stuff here. It actually seems to fit nicely. It has some of the Tandun sort of the tones and everything that we got before. A lot of the pounding drums, but some choral stuff. I mean, it was a really effective score. I really liked it. What'd you think?
Oh, I thought it was fantastic. And you look at the last 4 major properties that he's been involved in. I'm a fan of every bit of the scores that he's done for those. The Strain, Westworld, Game of Thrones. And you know what? I haven't even heard any of it yet, but he's on Prison Break, the sequel, which is coming out. I actually watched every bit of that show when it was still on. So I actually really like it. He is I think he's an incredibly talented composer, and this film was no exception. Strong theme, something I found myself sort of wailing as I left the theater.
Yeah.
The numbers are interesting, and I'm curious in this. When you look at how it's done just in this last opening weekend in the US, it's been open for a long time, right? In China. When you see this, or I guess in other places around the world, when you see this sort of a film, how do you set expectations for what you want opening weekend to look like in a film that has been so stunningly successful elsewhere already?
Well, like I was saying, I think that the producers at Legendary are really trying to find a way to make some crossover films that are going to be really successful in China, but will also be really successful over here. That's, I think, the goal that they're working toward. Are they going to hit that with this film? I don't know. I think that the trailers were so poorly done that, I mean, honestly, the film looked laughable when I saw the trailers. It just looked like just complete nonsense. Watching the film, though, I found it to be so much more enjoyable. And I just don't know if many people are going to give it the chance to actually go and enjoy it. It did cost this huge action spectacular, ended up costing, from what I found, about $150 million to make. It's Zhang Yimou's most expensive film to date, and it's the biggest Hollywood-China co-production ever. Like you said, it did open in China back in mid-December, December 15th, 2016. It's had a very slow expansion around the world before finally opening here in the U.S. For us recording just this past Friday, February 17th, 2017, opposite Fistfight and A Cure for Wellness. It did open really strong in China, where its box office receipts accounted for about 80% of the foreign gross. Since the movie just opened here, we'll have to just keep updating our spreadsheet with info after its theatrical run ends. But for now, it looks like it's had a fairly weak opening at the box office, unfortunately, with only about 22 million, coming in at number 3 behind Lego Batman and 50 Shades Darker. We're, like I said, recording it right after opening weekend. So that's all we have for now. But if you just look at this information, even without factoring in the rest of its domestic run, it at least has made its money back. So I don't know what they spend on prints and advertising. That may be hurting it. But for now, I'd say, you know what? They're making their money back at least. Maybe it's going to give them a chance to try it out again. See if they can find one that's going to create a better financial profit on both sides of the globe.
I can't believe your tone and your voice it's like you're in Andy Buzzkill mode, and the movie's like over 200 million worldwide right now, and like that we are even having a conversation where that kind of box office receipt is at all depressing is stunning to me.
Well, and it's funny, I just read through that, and I didn't actually say how much it has made overseas, which is kind of funny. I skipped all of that. I just said that, it's made for about 80% of its foreign gross. over in
Right.
over in China. But yeah, I mean, it has made almost it's about 245 million internationally. So yeah, I mean, you're right. I am just saying, in context of those people who are really kind of banking on it succeeding on both sides, I think they're doing really well over on that side of the globe. I think that they're struggling over on this side. So if you just look at the domestic box office, I think that it's a disappointment. But you're right. When you look at the international figures, when a film is on at least at this point, it's made about $267 million worldwide. It's a success. So it's one of those. There's good and bad, I think.
There's good and bad. Just like there is good and bad over at flickchart.com. I think it's time for us to rank it.
Oh, let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. That's where you're going to find our profile. You can also just swipe over to the show notes in your podcast app of choice. And as we record this, Overcast 3 was released. That is my podcast app of choice. So plug to Overcast 3. It's really delightful. And so you swipe over to the show notes. You can tap on Flickchart and you can see it'll take you right to this movie through the magic of internet, and you can add it to your collection. And then let's see how well it stacks up. I'm really curious about this.
Well, we'll see how it goes. It's going to be a tough start because first up we have the Great Wall versus Joe versus the volcano. Going back to our conversation about holding up over time, I'm still picking Joe versus the volcano.
I will too. I feel bad about it. I think, but I'd watch Joe first.
I know.
Hands down. Absolutely.
The Great Wall or the Host? Bong
Great
Joon-ho.
Wall.
Yeah, I guess I will too. I mean, I'm surprised you will though.
Yeah, no, I had a good time at this movie. I feel like I may be, or in this case, we may be an island. It doesn't look like it's getting all that great a press, and I'm disappointed about that because I think it's an entertaining romp. But I did like it, and I think that's reflective of my choices here.
Absolutely. The Great Wall or What's Up, Doc?
Oh, the Great Wall.
Yeah, I'm going to say the Great Wall. The Great Wall or the Night of the Hunter?
I'm going with the Night of the Hunter.
Me too. The Great Wall or Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom? I'm going with Indy.
I think I'm going with Indy as well.
Even though that's oft maligned, I'm still picking it.
Yeah.
The Great Wall or Outland?
I'm going with Outland, please.
I might go with the Great Wall here.
How strong?
It's awfully fun to watch. A lot of really interesting visuals. I think I'm going to enjoy watching any of the fight sequences of the Great Wall over and over and over again. And I mean, I certainly enjoyed Outland. I'm really glad to have discovered that film because I had not seen it before. But I think that the Great Wall is just going to be a more something I can return to more often just to enjoy the visual feast of it.
But Andy, Sean Connery's accent doesn't waver. Not even a little bit.
True.
And he's really from Scotland.
Wow, for that I feel like I should give it to you.
I think you should.
I will. All right. How's that? The Great Wall or Field of Dreams? Totally Field of Dreams for me.
Andy, I'm all about reciprocity today. You can have it. Old 2x4 gets the nod. 2x4 over Helm's Deep with dragons.
Oh, there you go. All right, here we got some Andy Lau face-off here. The Great Wall or Infernal Affairs?
Oh, dear.
I had some issues with the shrink character in Infernal Affairs, but I still think I'm going to pick that film.
I'm going to pick that film.
The Great Wall or the original, The Magnificent Seven?
The original Magnificent Seven, please.
I may go The Great Wall, but I'm pretty wishy-washy about this decision. Are you pretty strong on Magnificent Seven? I would go with Magnificent Seven just for the music. I'd probably go with the Great Wall just for the fight scenes. I'm a little torn. I mean, Magnificent Seven has, some of the characters I don't like as much. I certainly would pick Seven Samurai over Great Wall, but here I'm kind of leaning toward Great Wall just for the funness of it.
Okay, now remind me, what are the characters that you don't like in Magnificent Seven?
The young one, the kind of the German actor who plays the young one who does the little bullfight thing and and stays behind to be with the girl and kind of the positive happy ending and stuff. That sort of stuff I just didn't, I wasn't as crazy about.
They do the same thing in this movie.
I know.
Positive, happy ending and
I know
whatnot.
they do. I know they do, but you don't have women jumping off of the wall on bungee cords.
You're right. Bait. The bait patrol.
Yes.
I'll give it to you for that. You go, Shaolin ladies.
All right. Well, that puts the Great Wall at 181 on our chart. Probably the lowest of our series, but it still is an awfully fun one, and it's in good company. So there you go.
It is fun. It's silly. I mean, there is a lot of silly if you go into it too seriously, I think. I enjoy it. I enjoy what it represents. Again, if you look at it as metaphor, I have a good time with it. I think I like it more after spending so much time talking about Zhang Yimou. I really wonder if this film would represent quite as well had we seen it cold.
That's a good point. If somebody who has never seen a Zhang Yimou film goes into this cold and watches it, are they going to think that it holds up?
So what you need to do is go watch Judo and the other one, Raise the Red Lantern, and Hero, and then listen to all conversations on them. So they're your investment. You're about it to 9-10 hours, maybe 11 hours, and then you can go see this movie. So homework, and then we'll see what you think.
They've already watched it and they've listened to this by the time you've gotten to this point, Pete.
See, you didn't even know it, but you've already failed, listener, dear listener. You have failed yourself. Andy, what does this do for your Letterboxd ranking over at letterboxd.com/thenextreel?
I am giving this one a 3.5.
Is there any Andy Love involved in that?
No, I think that's got plenty of Andy Love already.
Already?
Yeah.
Got the stink. The stink of Andy Love is all over this movie. I will give you... I was coming in at 3 stars. I thought it was just kind of a middle of the road, better than 2.5, but I will agree with you for arithmetic's sake at 3.5 stars, and it'll be Pete's star of Andy Love.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, there you go.
Look at that.
Now, we've got some schedule shakeup going on right now, right? But where do we go after this series, now that we've wrapped up our Zhang Yimou series?
Well, we are going to be, before we get into our Hughes Brothers series, which is our next series, we actually have our next Listener's Choice episode, which is going to be with at Fegfeet from our Pony Prize winner from 2016. So this will be an exciting one, and we're going to be talking about the immigrants. Not the immigrants, the emigrants.
I've written that wrong almost every time. That's not the 6.5 hour one, right?
It is. It is. If you watch the second film in the series with it, we're only watching the first of the 2 films. I think Finn wanted us to watch both of them, but I think for our sake, I think we just picked the one, and then maybe we'll watch the second one as a one-off down the road.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Well, between now and then, it sounds like I better rest up, Andy. So I'm gonna go to bed.
Well, there's a lot of dead dragons out there, so I'm going to get the grill going. Time for a feast of Tao Te steaks.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
What star rate is a new film, so there aren't as many Amazon reviews to choose from. So what star rating did you end up with?
I ended up with a 5.
A 5, Andy.
Well, one, the only 1 star is incredibly long, so I figured I'd skip it. And
Okay.
2, I was just like, it might be fun to see somebody who's really enjoyed this film and just hear from them.
All right. Well, mine's short, and I'm going to get it out of the way. Do you mind?
Go for it.
All right. So mine is a 3-star, and it's titled Another, quote, Kill the Alien Queen movie to save the world. Oh no, not another Kill the Queen movie. First it was Ender's Game, then the remake of Independence Day, and now this. This is the third recent movie where the plot is to kill the queen of alien creatures. Views more like a video game made into a movie. The third, Andy.
Yeah,
the third Kill the Queen.
That's if you don't count the like
all
Aliens.
the Kill the Queen movies.
Yeah, it
or
seems like they're skipping a lot.
The first Independence Day. Technically, he did say recent movies. I buy that, but maybe there's a collection of Kill the Queen movies that we need to put together.
Alice in Wonderland. I've got a 5-star by Susie Q, who says, "Don't be fooled. You will enjoy this movie. I went in with an open mind. All I wanted for the movie to do is keep me entertained. It is fantasy, so that should be the end of the discussion of monsters. You won't care why they're fighting. Just remember, the critics missed the point."
Oh.
So there you go. Somebody who loves it, they want the monster. So there you go.
It is. It's a monster movie. Don't go in thinking this is a historical drama. Don't go in thinking this is a Matt Damon vehicle. This is a monster movie, and if you're okay with that, you might have fun. How about that?
I like it.
Thanks, Amazon.
It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, I know, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
In Season 6, our Disease Films series had adaptations like The Omega Man, based on I Am Legend, The Andromeda Strain, Children of Men, and Blindness.
I Am Legend is so much better than The Omega Man.
What about the Will Smith version?
Don't get me started.
For our This Is Real Life Jack series, we talked Black Hawk Down and Seabiscuit, some great true stories based on fantastic books.
And we had more listeners' choices like The Fly, The Emigrants, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
You just did a series on The Fly on the Sitting in the Dark podcast. Did you read the original material?
Wasn't watching every Fly movie enough?
Our Big Betty Davis series featured adaptations like The Little Foxes, Now Voyager, All About Eve, and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Are you calling Betty Davis big?
Only in personality and force.
She is a force to be reckoned with.
We talked about the entire The Godfather trilogy, of course. Iconic page to screen, even if it is just the one Mario Puzo book. I wonder if Coppola will ever make The Sicilian.
We also had some Zhang Yimou adaptations with Judo and Raise the Red Lantern. Absolutely gorgeous movies.
And don't forget the Hughes Brothers series with From Hell, based on the graphic novel. Brilliant material.
Kelly Reichardt gave us Wendy and Lucy and Certain Women, adapted from short stories.
Plus more Hayao Miyazaki as we tackled Howl's Moving Castle.
Find all these books and more at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the show.
Get the full list of adapted films that we've covered at thenextreel.com/originals and start your next read today.